Good afternoon, producer Susan. Um, by the way, are you showing recording on your end?
I am.
You are because I'm not showing a recording here. This is this new upgraded video, a new
It's in
upgrade.
the upper left-hand corner.
Okay, there it is, my new upgraded version. All right. So today's December 13th, and this is the second time we're doing this podcast, right?
Because, technology is wonderful when it works.
Because yesterday we did the whole podcast and it didn't save it, so we're doing it all over again.
So let's see if we can do a better job today.
Well, we ought to get through it a lot quicker since I don't have to ask a lot of questions you don't know the answers to, right? So, all right. So anyway, so today is December 13th, and it's the situation with Jerzee Joe, news and perspective you won't hear on TV. So our quote of the week is by Sam Walton, the founder of Wal-Mart, about the power of customers. We'll tell you about an incredible coincidence that occurred during the Mega Millions lottery drawing last week. We'll tell you about the most expensive private wedding in history that took place last month and why the groom might be spending the rest of his life in prison. And our stupidest thing all week, we once again have the three contenders. The first is about a woman, a gun, and an MRI machine. The second is about another person who can't define what a woman is. And the third is about idiot students repeating a pro-Palestinian chant that they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
In a related story, we'll play a clip from Congressional hearing last week where three university presidents were asked about hate speech on their campuses and how the answers they gave have already cost one of them their job. And in another related story, we'll tell you which ethnic group in this country has suddenly decided that maybe owning a gun and learning how to use it might not be a bad thing after all.
Yep.
We'll tell you how the National NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has been fabricating temperature data in order to convert measured cooling trends into reported warming trends. They're literally taking actual readings that says the Earth is cooling. They're manipulating data to come up with reports that say the Earth is warming. It's very interesting. We'll play a clip of how they're doing that. Time permitting, we'll tell you about a squatter who moved into a vacant home that he didn't own, fixed it up, and sold it for a huge profit that the courts allowed him to keep after the owner of the property challenged his right to sell the home. And our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from Granada Hills, California, where three thugs invade a house, but only two leave alive. So, sound familiar?
Sounds familiar.
Sound familiar. All right. So, our quote of the week by Wal-Mart founder Sam Walton. And he said, there is only one boss, and that boss is the customer. He can fire everyone in the company from the president to the janitor simply by taking their money to spend elsewhere. If you want to be successful, have better customer service than anyone else. He also talks about the customer that you only comes once. He talks about customers that come in, and if they don't have a good experience, they're likely to never come back. So that's why he said you only get one chance to make a good first impression. And that's why he says you always need to make a great first impression. How many times have you been to a business, you weren't treated well, and then you left because you weren't treated well, and you never decided to never go back there? Has that ever happened to you?
Absolutely, all the time.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, so that's our quote of the week from Sam Walton. Anyway, Mega Millions. Now, we talked about this last night. So Mega Millions, like Powerball, is drawn twice a week. And it's not unusual to go months and months and months without getting a single winner. What's even more unusual is for two winners to hit on the same day. That's only with Mega Millions, that's only happened once in the last 5 years.
Mm.
So what happened in California last week? Not only did two winners hit the same jackpot on the same day, they both bought their ticket at the same convenience store in California. Now, how bizarre is that to have two winners bought their same ticket at the same store in the same state?
Yeah, that is crazy. That is, what are the odds?
I mean, I can't even begin to count. First of all, the odds of winning Powerball like 600 million to 1.
Mm-hmm.
The odds of two people winning it on the same day are several billion to 1. And the odds of two people buying their ticket, winning it on the same day, buying their ticket in the same store has got to be, 1,000,000,000 to 1. It was just an incredible coincidence. Anyway.
Yeah, California does seem to have the most winners.
Well, they got the most people. They got 40 million. They are have the lowest population of any state in the union with 40 million people. But still, to have two winners buy the same ticket in the same convenience store, that was on December 8th.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
All right. So we talked about this yesterday, and you hadn't heard of this, but The most expensive, I asked you to guess what the most expensive private wedding, again, this is excluding like royal weddings, but what was your guess is what did you think the most expensive private wedding
I
was?
said $1 million. Yeah, I said
Well,
1 million.
this, the father of the bride spent $59 million for a wedding for his daughter, which took place in Paris. He flew all of the guests to Paris, first class round trip, put them up in the five-star hotel for a week. They rented out uh, the Palace of Versailles for the actual ceremony. They had the rehearsal dinner at the Paris Opera House, and they hired Maroon 5, the group, to perform as at the wedding reception. That was the music. No, but now here's the best part. So $59 million for your daughter's wedding. By the way, her name was Madeline Brockway. The groom is a guy named Jacob Legrand. Well, it turns out in March, he got into police were called to his house. He wound up firing his gun at the two police officers. So he was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault against public servants, which carries a potential maximum life sentence. He had been offered a 25-year plea deal, which he turned down. So, if your daddy and your daughter's fiance is under indictment for attempted murder of two police officers, do you think you might have cut back on the wedding, considering that he might be
Yeah.
spending the rest
I
of
mean,
his life?
that's an absolutely ridiculous amount of money to spend on a wedding, period.
Period.
But to know that that wedding is potentially going to be in question, yeah.
Well, I don't know if the wedding. I guess the wedding would
Or,
still be legal,
but
but
the marriage, I guess the marriage will be
the
in
marriage.
question.
Yeah, I mean, you think she's going to stay celibate and married to this guy
Yeah,
if he sends
not if he's in jail.
not if he's in jail for 25 years to life. So
Mhm.
anyway, so that's Jacob Legrand, 29, is facing life in prison for shooting at two North Texas police officers in March of this year, which was 8 months before the wedding. So Dad had 8 months to cancel
Mhm.
plans, change things and whatnot. If it was that, I would have said, okay, we'll schedule the wedding for the day after your trial's over.
Yeah.
But no, they're going ahead with that. All right. So, as we talked about last night, we have three contenders for the stupidest thing I've heard all week. So, the first one, which you gave a very high score to, was in Wisconsin, a woman who maybe she's a rocket scientist, I'm not sure, but she was scheduled for an MRI. So she put the gown on, but under her gown, she brought her loaded handgun into the MRI machine with her. And when they turned on the magnets, the gun flew out, hit this wall, discharged, and shot her in the ass.
Yeah.
And I asked you to score that, and I think you gave that one a 10 in terms of how stupid can you be,
Yeah,
right?
the reason why I don't understand is that when you go in for an MRI, they ask you a million questions and they ask them to you over and over again, and they're so particular. I mean, everything from your earrings to even some tattoos that have like metal ink in them, like they are so thorough in
Yeah.
making sure that you have no metal in or on your body. So
Yep.
how did that get missed?
Well, obviously I don't think she was deaf, so she heard all that, but she decided, no, I'm just going to take my gun with me because I feel better. Now, that was contender number one, which you gave a 10. The second
Yeah.
is a congressional hearing, and the woman being questioned, and I want to stress her title and the organization. She is president of the National Women's Law Center. Now, remember, not the National Law Center, not the National Latino, but the National Women's Law Center. So the congressman asks her to define what a woman is because you're representing the Women's Law Center. So listen to how she answers the question or doesn't answer the question when she's asked what the definition of a woman is.
Woman the same? No.
Well, I'm not a scientist, but
Well, we're talking about science here, so
I'm going to back this up.
they're not genetic composition of a transgender versus a woman the same? No.
well, I'm not a scientist,
Well,
but
we're talking about science here, so I hope they're not the same. So that's why you see all these physiological differences.
if I can answer though, I mean, if your question is, how do you define woman? A woman is an adult female, but there's a lot of variation that goes beyond my level of
Well, I
biology.
tell you, you can't, I'm not looking at a definition, I'm talking about the science. The science genetically is a man is a different genetics than women, plain and simple. That's just
So
what it is.
I guess what I would say is that I'm not a scientist or doctor, but it's my understanding that it is more complex than what you are saying, in that there is variation among men and among women, and sometimes more variation among than there is between. Again, I'm not a scientist, and
Again, I'm not a scientist. To me, it's not complicated. You can either define it genetically in terms of XX and XY chromosomes. And I always get those mixed up. Which one
I
has
think-
the XX?
XX is female and XY is male. And I
Male.
think any person who has graduated from high school can answer that question on a scientific level from like DNA chromosomes.
Right.
But I think the real problem is nowadays is that they need to better define the question. So the question is, what gender were you assigned at birth? And then what gender do you identify later? So I think that it's in the question needs to be better
Yeah,
defined.
and you could be right. But of course, the accepted answer would be, a woman has a uterus and a male has, penis and testicles. That would be the
Well,
the
now
s-
then see, that's where it gets complicated because surgical, barring surgical aside, from a biological standpoint of DNA chromosomes, that can never be changed.
right.
You always have those XX chromosomes or those XY chromosomes, and
Right.
that will never change, regardless of what surgical procedures you have done and regardless of what hormones you take.
Well,
synthetic-
I should have said born with a uterus. I mean, a woman is somebody who's been born with a uterus. Now, what that person chooses to do later doesn't change the fact that she was born with
Yeah.
the uterus. So that was our candidate number 2.
Yeah.
And last but not least is the biggest one, which made the national news. This was Congressman Lee Stefanik interviewing the presidents of MIT, University of Pennsylvania, which is different than Penn State,
Yep.
and Harvard over the Jewish, anti-Israeli protests that were going on their campuses, to the point where some of the Jewish students had to lock themselves in certain buildings because there were people outside, chanting for infidata, death to Jews and whatnot. And so the Congresswoman is saying, does all of this, chanting of, death to Jews, genocide, does this constitute harassment and bullying? Pretty simple question.
Yep.
So we're gonna start with the end of the president of MIT, and then we're gonna go right to the UPenn president. Here we go.
Mhm.
Let me find her.
Dr. Cornbluth,
Oh, hang on.
conduct or rules. That would be investigated as
All
harassment.
right, so this is MIT.
Invasive and severe. Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment.
Yes.
And-
I am asking.
And by the way, and she's
specifically
smiling
calling
as
for the genocide
I'm
of
going to back this up.
Jews. Yes.
This woman, by the way, she's got this smirk on her face when she answers this question. She's not taking this seriously at all. She's got this big grin on her, and she's smiling like this is a big joke. So here we go.
Speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your
If
testimony that
it-
you will not answer yes?
If it if the
Yes
speech
or no?
becomes, if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
So if they go beyond just calling for death to Jews to actually killing Jews, then it's harassment and bullying. I want to know.
I would like to know under what context, she's saying this is contextual, what context is this okay?
I have the same question. Under what context wouldn't it be considered bullying and
Hate
harassment?
speech in itself, hate speech is not covered under the Free Speech Amendment.
Right,
Hate speech is as I believe it's a felony. I don't even think it's a misdemeanor.
Right. And do you think for 1 second, if the group that was doing the chanting and the protesting were white supremacists were wearing KKK hoods, calling for death to African American students, you
That's
don't
clearly defined as hate speech.
right. So you don't, and how do you think she would have answered if this was a hearing about,
Absolutely.
yeah, she would have said, absolutely, it's bullying and harassment and goes against our policy. But no, it's okay if you're calling for genocide and death to Jews, and it depends on the context and only if it turns into actions. So I don't know. That's got to be up there pretty close to the stupidest thing I've heard all week with the woman and the gun and the MRI. If you had to pick one of those two, which would you pick?
I just cannot for the life of me figure out how the gun got by the MRI, because knowing how people in the medical profession are supposed to be so thorough at clearing that.
Yeah, but they don't, they don't do a body search. They don't frisk you. I've had
But
MRIs.
asking,
Yeah, but they ask, but obviously the
yeah.
woman lied, and so anyway. All right, but moving on a related story. Now, in the past, we've talked about, last year we had, excuse me, got a cold here. Last year we had African Americans and women, and African American women in particular became the largest group of first-time gun buyers. And then when we had the two prison breaks in Pennsylvania where where there were a manhunt going on for a week, the people near those cities where those inmates escaped, they were buying guns.
Yep.
And 2 months ago in Maine, when the guy who shot up the bowling alley, there was a 4-day manhunt for him.
Yep.
The Maine gun stores were flooded with first-time gun buyers, wanting to buy guns and saying, what's the best gun should I have for home defense? Because they realized that the police can't protect you. That if this guy breaks into your house, it's seconds, not minutes. So if this guy who's a murderer, who's armed, he's just killed 14 people. If he breaks into your house, it'll be over in seconds. There's a line in, I think, from Top Gun, where they're in the dogfight, and the crew chief asked the guy in the control room how long, and he said, well, 20 minutes, and the guy said this thing will be over in minutes. Well, same thing. If a murderer breaks into your house, it's going to be over in seconds, not minutes. So what's the latest group to come to the realization that the police can't protect you and that you're the only person primarily responsible for your safety? Guess what? Jews in America.
Yeah.
So if you Google the words, just Google the phrase Jews buying guns and set your time filter for the past 60 days, you will find literally dozens of stories from different outlets, some local, some national, reporting that Jews are flooding into gun stores. And here's a quote from just this is a CNN story. This is just one of dozens. And here's the quote. Gene Petrino, a retired SWAT commander in the Coral Springs, Florida, told CNN he's gotten roughly 15 to 20 Jewish people per week seeking training since the war in Israel broke out. The desire for gun training and ownership differs from the usual views on firearms in the Jewish community, according to Mark, a Jewish photographer in Houston who owns 2 guns and requested that CNN not reveal his full last name for safety. He said, I'm actually surprised to hear that other Jewish people also have guns. In terms of the Jewish community overall, I know most people do not own guns just because most Jews are liberal and advocate for gun control. And here's a survey. In 2018, the American Jewish Committee poll showed that 70% of Jewish respondents thought it was more important to have more gun controls than ownership to protect Americans' rights. So, that gets flipped on its head once again. So, and I think for the first time now, more than 50% of American homes have a gun in them, which has never been true before. Well, not since the 1900s, at
I was gonna
least.
say the 1900s, they all had guns.
Yeah, in
Most of them
1900 they had a gun, but after World War II, that kept going down and down and down and down, and now suddenly it's bouncing back to where now more than half the homes in this country have a gun in them.
Yep.
So anyway, so that's the latest trend in who's buying guns. All right, you want to talk about global warming?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So say you're the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and you're NASA, who gives you all the satellite data, and your bosses want you to publish trend data showing that the Earth is rapidly warming, but the actual temperature data you have shows just the opposite. Well, what do? Your boss wants you to send a report showing it's getting warmer, and all your actual temperature readings show it's getting cooler. Well, you do 2 things. First, you find a reason to correct, and I put the word correct in quotation marks, those actual readings to show that they're higher than reported. And second, you make up data to substitute for nearly 50% of the temperature reporting stations that no longer exist or have stopped functioning. This
Mhm.
5-minute video will explain how those two government agencies are manipulating temperature data to get the results they want instead of the results that are being reported. And let me see if I can find this clip. And I won't play the whole thing, but I'll play enough so you can get the basis for it. Here we go.
Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com. In my previous video, I discussed how NASA has turned a long-term cooling trend in the United States into a warming trend by altering the data. But most of this data tampering is actually done by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which I'll refer to as NOAA. They show a strong warming trend in average maximum U.S. temperatures since 1895. But their thermometer data shows a strong cooling trend. They changed the data from a cooling trend into a warming trend through two adjustments. The first one is the time of observation bias adjustment, and the second is the final adjustment. The actual thermometer data shows that the United States is cooling. But through the use of data tampering, NOAA produces a politically expedient warming trend. The pink lines show the measured cooling trend, and the red lines show the adjusted warming trend. A big part of this adjustment is that they're simply making up data for stations which are no longer reporting. There are 1,280 thermometers in the United States Historical Climatology Network, but since 1989, NOAA has been losing data from these stations. In this year, only 819 stations have reported data. If a station
So half the reporting stations no longer report actual data. That's
Yep.
important. Here we go.
doesn't report temperatures during a particular month, NOAA simply fabricates some temperatures using a computer model. So far this year, 47% of the NOAA data for the United States is fabricated. Not surprisingly, this fake data is producing a warming trend, which is what NOAA wants people to see. Current adjusted temperatures are about 1 degree warmer than the actual measured data. But the adjusted temperatures from 100 years ago are about 1.5 degrees cooler than the actual thermometer data. So NOAA is producing about 2.5 degrees of warming via the process of data tampering.
And let me explain for you in case you missed it. So not only are they adjusting the current data upwards, making it warmer, they're going back 100 years and they're finding an excuse to restate that 100-year-old data
Yep.
to be cooler than it actually reported so that they can show a larger increase. So they're not only tampering with current data, they're tampering with historical data. You say, well, it was a lot cooler back then than the temperature than we actually have data for, and they're finding excuses to make the Earth seem cooler 100 years ago than it actually was. So they're tampering on both ends to make the delta look even bigger. How dishonest is that?
Yeah.
Here we go.
The best way to understand how this fake warming trend is being generated is by looking at some of the stations which NOAA is making up data for. So far this year, NOAA has made up data for 777 out of 1,280 stations in the network. One of these stations is at Lake Itasca, Minnesota. The measured thermometer data shows cooling, but NOAA alters the data to create a strong warming trend. There's no scientific basis for what they're doing. This is just what they want people to see.
All right, and I won't play the whole thing, but if you go to Real Climate Science, and producer Susan, I hope you can put this
Yep.
link up on the
I'll
website.
add the link to the website.
So you can listen to the whole 5 minutes, but it's just stunning. And I don't think one person in 500 actually realizes that all these graphs they're seeing that the White House puts out
Mhm.
are based on manipulated, made up data. I mean,
Yeah.
literally made up data. So it just blows my mind. How much time we got?
We got about 10 minutes.
All right, so we'll roll through this. Maybe we finish a little early tonight. So we talked about this last night. So you've heard of adverse possession, right?
Yep.
So let's say that your neighbor, puts his driveway, expands his driveway, and 2 feet of his driveway winds up over on your property line.
Yep.
And you don't ever say anything about it. Maybe you don't even know about it.
Mhm.
That your neighbor's driveway, the 2 feet of the edge of your neighbor's driveway is actually on your property. Well, if you don't say anything about it, it varies from state to state, 7 years, 10 years, 15 years. But when that statute of limitations runs out, your neighbor gets to claim that piece of property because you didn't object to his use. Well, in England, a squatter moved into a vacant house. Guy, apparently his mother died. Squatter moved into the house, started fixing up. He was living there. He was mowing the lawn. Owner never said a word. And well, after 10 years, the squatter decided he was going to sell the house. And he did. He sold the house. And the owner said, wait a minute, you can't sell that house. It was my house. Well, he never even charged the guy $1 a year rent. And the court said, no, you knew he was using your house. You didn't object to it. Adverse possession. Title of that house passed to him because you didn't object to him using it. So the squatter wound up selling a house that he didn't initially own and got to keep 100% of the proceeds. So adverse possession is really serious stuff. By the way, same thing. That's why at Rockefeller Center in New York, which they allow 364 days a year, you can walk through the middle of Rockefeller Center. You know, there's one day a year where they close off, where you can't cross Rockefeller Center to the next street over. Did you know that?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Rockefeller Center, one day of the year, closes off access so that you can't cut across. I forget what the two streets that it goes across. It's one, I think, Fifth Avenue to Fourth Avenue, whatever. Rockefeller Center closes off access across Rockefeller Center for one day a year to just reassert their right that it's private property and you do not have unrestricted use to use their property. So
Is there a particular day of the year they do that?
I forget what day of the year, but it's one day, like maybe January 2nd or something, the day after New Year's. But yeah, one day of the year they close off Rockefeller Center to traffic, and you have to go around. You have to go around, not through. All right. So you ready for a taxpayer relief shot?
Yeah, what is it this time?
Well, first, for those who aren't aware, let's tell you what a taxpayer relief shot is. We'll have the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida, tell you what a taxpayer relief shot is. And here we go.
If somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully, you'll save the taxpayers money.
And again, we've talked about the enormous cost. If you want to arrest a thug, give him a trial, court-appointed defender, put him in jail for 10 years at $75,000 a year, it costs $1 million to put a thug in jail. So here we go to Granada Hills, California, which is a fairly upscale neighborhood. And this is also some great reporting here on the part of the reporting. So 3 thugs. Now, initially the anchors say it was 4 people. Turned out it was only 3 people. So you'll hear a little confusion, but here's the report.
Tonight in Granada Hills, that's where there's been another home invasion, but this time the victim fought back. Police say 4 suspects, they entered the home early this morning, but only 3 left after the homeowner shot and killed one of the would-be robbers.
Now let's go to Chris Wolf. He's live in Northridge tonight where that investigation is underway. Chris?
Yeah, Rick, Kareen, the LAPD's Devonshire station is handling this case. One thing is very clear. People are fed up. Many believe the criminal justice system in Southern California is failing them. They are defending themselves and turning the tables on criminals. With a seemingly endless violent crime wave plaguing Southern California, homeowners, would-be victims, are increasingly fighting back. Investigators say around 5 a.m. Saturday morning, 3 men wearing dark clothing, hoodies, and masks broke into a home on Swinton Avenue in Granada Hills with the intention of committing a robbery. The homeowner, a grandmother, and toddler were inside. Fearing for his life, the victim grabbed a handgun and fired multiple times on the intruders, fatally striking one of them. The 2 others scattered, and police believe at least one of them was injured because authorities discovered a trail of blood in the neighborhood. The getaway car, a black BMW sedan, was left at the scene. Video from the scene shows at least 2 men being handcuffed, but details are unclear. Police say they detained the resident involved in the shooting for questioning before paramedics examined him.
Our investigation will continue at this point, but anyone that's inside of their residence that is faced with a deadly threat and is perceived as a deadly threat has the right to protect themselves.
Some neighbors who spoke to us do not want to be identified.
The suspects messed with the wrong homeowner, So hopefully this we'll stop them or something. It makes me feel good that people actually protect their home and, they're able to protect their home and stop these guys.
We've been having burglaries every day in this neighborhood. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all this has happened. It's been a real problem here, and the residents here are fed up.
Just days earlier, a young husband and father in Granada Hills returned home from Christmas shopping to find several gunmen leaving his house with stolen items. He tried to chase them down. Did you try to ram that vehicle?
Yes, I did, like 2-3 times.
And about 2 weeks before that, also in Granada Hills, George Lozano Jr. grabbed his gun and chased off several hooded figures who were closing in on his property, all captured on security footage. It's unclear if all of these crimes were committed by the same people. Anyone with information should contact the LAPD. Reporting live in Northridge, I'm Chris Wolf, KTLA 5.
So what do you think? Was that a classic taxpayer relief shot? Producer Susan, you still there? Producer Susan, are you still there? I guess we lost you.